Greetings, everyone. Kevin McNally here, Success with Vision Loss and another eye-opener. First, sorry for the slight delay in my just about weekly posts. We did suffer a death in the family, which we had to attend to last week. Today, I want to talk about visual memory. A lot of things change as you lose your vision or if you've lost your vision. And one thing that people don't often understand is that there's a limited time span in terms of memory. And when you lose your vision, that time span is affected. So if this sounds like something that may interest you, a kind of an overview of it, stick with me, hang in there, and let's go. Visual memory describes the relationship between perceptual processing, or what you see, in the encoding, and think of encoding as a way your brain converts information into an item or into a way that it can be stored and then recalled later on from short-term memory or long-term memory in some cases. So we're talking about you perceive something, your brain processes it and modifies it and stores it or encodes it in a way in your memory, depending on long-term or short-term, in a way that you can then retrieve it. And that is basically your memory. Obviously, I am not a neurosurgeon or neuro anything, but that's the understanding of how memory sort of works. Visual memory occurs over a broad time range. It can be instantaneous from eye movements and things you see. And it can be much more long-term visual memory. It can be like years-long memory, where you're remembering things as you're perceiving them over a long expanse of time. It's kind of confusing, but it happens, I guess, in all different levels memory. So it's a form of memory which preserves some characteristics of our senses pertaining to a visual experience. We are able to place in memory visual information like clues, which resemble objects or places or animals or people, into a mental image. It's the way your brain stores information. The experience of visual memory is also referred to as the mind's eye, through which we can retrieve from our memory a mental image of the original object, place, animal, person. Visual memory is one of several cognitive systems which are all interconnected parts that combine to form human memory. Visual memory focuses on one's ability to recall visual information that has been seen. Obviously, right? Visual memory. Visual memory is a critical factor in reading and writing. Here's the rub. Going blind affects all senses and disrupts memory. It's been shown through research that memory is affected, balance is affected, and the encoding, that process where the brain transfers what it's seeing into a form that it can then store, are all altered. For example, if mice lose their vision immediately after birth due to a genetic defect, this has a considerable impact both on the organization of the cerebral cortex and on memory ability. They demonstrated that in the months after blindness emerged, the density of neurotransmitter receptors that regulate that process are severely altered. Big words and this and that, but really all it means is when you lose your sight, you're losing your ability to store and recall memory, your long-term and short-term memory. Those items that you've been processing and putting way back in your memory banks are now affected because, well, you're not seeing them anymore. Now, I bet many of you have heard that, someone's hearing gets better when they lose their eyesight. I know I've heard this many times, and in some ways my hearing has gotten much better, especially in certain ranges. Following the loss of vision, other senses do gradually become more sensitive, tactile, hearing acuity, and one sense of smell have been proven to all improve, enabling a blind individual to use these senses to navigate accurately through the environment, despite a lack of visual input. But the process takes time and practice. Researchers studied what happens in the brain after loss of vision in mice. After blindness occurs, the brain tries to compensate for the loss of ramping up its sensitivity to the missing visual signals. That's what it does. It ramps it up. When this fails to work, the other senses begin to adapt and increase their acuities. One thing for certain, other senses do ramp up when vision is lost, but it takes time and it takes major effort and it's exhausting. After blindness, the brain does try to compensate for that loss. It's not easy, and it's something I've discussed with people a lot, in that we're exhausted because we're trying to always be compensating for not being able to see as well. It's very difficult to understand unless you're going through it. There is a high level of visual input that all normally sighted people get every day, and it's kind of done just freely, and you don't even realize. But to someone losing their vision, it's exhausting. Every single interaction. If I'm awake, my body is overstressing, trying to compensate for what it's not receiving visually. Now, pertaining to memory, here's the rub for me personally. If you're not receiving visual input, and this could be for anyone in one sense, it doesn't mean just because of vision loss, but think about a friend you haven't seen in 20 or 30 years. Is it more difficult for you to recall that person's face? Obviously, you're not going to be able to recall their face to what they look like now, but can you recall what they look like clearly, the way you can recall maybe your neighbor that you just talked to yesterday? And so, if there are people in your life who you haven't seen in a long time, slowly their image is fading. And even worse so for me, as you lose your vision, it's harder to get any visual input. Now, I could review photographs a lot and try to keep that visual memory alive, but it's more difficult when you're losing your vision. And because it's been shown that vision loss affects the way memory is stored or not stored, it's worse when you're losing your vision to try and maintain and recall memories that maybe, or people, or visions that maybe a normally sighted person would be able to do easier than someone who's losing their sight or has lost their sight. So if there's family members you haven't seen in a long time, and you may discover, or I may discover, or someone who's losing their vision may discover, that the person is kind of fading from your brain. And that is scary. You can try to compensate. You can try to look at photographs and this and that, but time marches on. And you can't recall the person as well, literally what they look like, even if it's somebody close to you. Success with vision loss comes in all shapes and sizes. Today, visual memory. It's kind of I don't want to say a no-brainer, but it kind of makes sense when you think about it. If you're not seeing things as well, those things are not being stored in your brain because you're not seeing them. And remember, everybody, we see with our brain. We don't see with our eyes. So if the brain is not receiving information, it's going to be a little more difficult to remember things. It's all just part of the process, but it's interesting information. I hope you enjoyed it. Looking forward to posting another audio cast every week at least. And again, thank you very much. Always visit the webpage, successwithvisionloss.com, or the other web pages tied to this, imcnally.com, or even 2blindbros.com. That's the number 2, blindbros.com. Remember, everyone, take care of each other. Have a good day.